It's the Meta microphone. Um, so anyway, I moved to this area about 4 years ago, and I have been just so thrilled. I surf every day. I just love Santa Cruz. I can't tell you how much it's changed my life. So when Doug asked me to do this, of course I said yes. And then he told me, "You're gonna have the chancellor on the deck with you." I'm like, what do you even call a chancellor? Like, Your Highness, or?
Call me Cindy.
And Boaz, So what fun. So Doug, I have to ask you a question. So I have a podcast, obviously, and let's just say I'm not very constrained on my podcast. So do you want me to act as a host like I would be on my podcast, or like NPR? Like NPR hosts would say, they would whisper and they'd say, "So Cindy, when you were first named to the chancellorship, what was your first feeling?" Or I can ask the kind of questions I want to ask.
Oh, yes.
Okay. So let's start off with something easy. Okay?
Okay.
For both of you. Let's say you had to design an education curriculum. Would you rather give the task to Ron DeSantis or ChatGPT?
ChatGPT.
You concur?
Yeah, I'm with you. But I would have a human in the loop. So I would have ChatGPT, but I'd want someone to look at it before it went out there.
Okay.
Oh, good thinking.
Just so we know where we all stand on these issues. I have a similar question about nuclear weapons. Should I ask that? Yeah, so let's say you had to assign an entity the ability to launch nuclear weapons. Okay? Would you rather that be Putin, Kim Jong-un, Donald Trump, or ChatGPT? Take a minute. Take a minute. There's no rush.
Wow. That's a tough one.
Well, okay, and I'll tell you the context. There's a semi-serious context to this, which is, especially from like the New York Times or the Washington Post, you always see these articles like, "I convinced ChatGPT to tell me to leave my wife, and I'm afraid that ChatGPT and AI is going to take over the world, and they're going to start launching missiles when the Russian LLM hates the American LLM, and it's going to be the end of the world." And so, we have to control AI. And I'm thinking, I think it's much more likely than some of these dictators are going to use nuclear weapons than ChatGPT. So I'm kind of a liberal, Doug. I mean, so I'm serious. So, what's your greatest fears about AI?
So I'm not too frightened. Maybe I don't know enough to be very frightened, but I think I think my biggest fear is trying to keep up because it goes so quick, and so will we even know what's happened until after it's happened?
But I mean, but you don't have the fear that you're not keeping up because you're being left behind. Your fear is that something's going to happen that you don't know why it happened.
Yeah, that's probably right. Good way to think about it.
Okay, so now I'd like to hear Boaz say that.
So without answering the question about having Donald Trump be the one that, I would say that my biggest fear is not that the robots are going to take over. I mean, that may happen, and I think that that's been in the media a lot about AI having that kind of AGI and the robots. But I think that right now we have some problems, and this will be a plug for the podcast. But so Shift AI is the podcast, shiftaipodcast.com. And one of the folks that came on the podcast, his name is Oren Etzioni. And Oren was the ex-CEO of Paul Allen Institute for Artificial Intelligence in Seattle. And he got invited by President Biden with 4 other folks. They came down to San Francisco, and he spoke with him. And I think one of the biggest fears that they talked about was human impersonation during elections. Mm. Now, there was a bunch of other things discussed, and if you want to hear the whole conversation, you can listen to the podcast, but that was a big one. And right now, a couple weeks ago, there were some young women in high school that were getting their faces put onto pornographic images, and it's a huge, huge problem right now with human impersonation, copyright issues in Hollywood. I was just down there speaking, and I'm more worried about that right now than I am about some of the robot fears that you're hearing.
And what's your idea for something like that? I mean, to curtail that.
I mean, I think that some of the things that are happening right now with some regulations are important. And I also share the concern that overregulation is going to stifle small businesses. And I represent small businesses to the federal government, Small Business Association. So I'm worried about that. I want to see the open source community be healthy. But at the same time, I think there are some real fears, and the public needs to be concerned. So I think local and state governments need to be thinking more about the ways that they regulate cautiously.
Okay. Now, it was mentioned earlier by one of the speakers that he's concerned about inappropriate use of AI. So, what would you consider inappropriate?
So I like what you were saying, Boaz, about the impersonation. That seems to be clearly inappropriate.
Right.
When we think about how it might be used, say, in an educational setting, then it gets a little bit more nuanced, because we know students are going to use ChatGPT. Probably we want to encourage them to use it, right? To teach them how to deal with digital literacy, but also ethical applications. And so, I think we have to embrace the opportunity to figure out how we incorporate it into our curriculum. I can give you great examples about how people at UC Santa Cruz are doing that. But I also worry a little bit about uh, the who gets to define what's appropriate, right? So you gave us a really clear example that I think probably everybody would agree about that. But then, if I use it to do something, write my term paper for me, that is that really inappropriate? And how do you understand the intellectual contributions? We think about the intellectual property, and you see it in the art world, I think, most clearly. Uh, Having artists having their intellectual creations taken up and being, in a way, modified or reproduced. So the appropriateness is nuanced in a way that comes back to these ideas about how do you regulate it, and who says what can be regulated and how it can be used. So part of it is attribution to people who created the intellectual property or the intellectual act, and part of it is how we can use things to be able to teach students, teach ourselves how we can do even more and explore new avenues.
Well, I think, I mean, taking this opportunity to have a chancellor here, the underlying question there is, at this time in history, how do you define education? Because maybe 200 years ago, defining education was, does the sun revolve around the earth or the earth around the sun? But now we're beyond that. So what's your definite, like, does a person need to know calculus? Does a person need to know that between two independent clauses and a conjunction, you need a comma when you have Grammarly or you have Quillbot? So what is an education right now?
Yeah, so I think the value in education is teaching people to think critically and to use knowledge to solve problems. Because we got plenty of problems that need to be solved. And when I don't teach very much now, but when I was teaching chemistry, I at first people worried about, well, Google seems to know everything, but okay, so you can ask Google, but then the value isn't the things that Google knows. It isn't what ChatGPT can scrape off the internet. The value is how can you use it to accomplish something, to do something creative, to solve a problem that we have to do now, not just at scale but at speed. is the world has got problems like climate change that we don't have a lot of time to be able to solve.
The question that was posed was about inappropriate.
I think the inappropriate thing that I'm worried about is bias. And I gave you the example before about the recruiting tool. And we tried really hard to make it unbiased. It's not perfect, but it's pretty good. And when I think about the way that AI is going to be implemented in government, or to choose employment for people, or procure money for applications for certain kind of federal money and state money, we want to make sure that there's no bias in these AIs. And also, the early AIs were trained. The training was a lot of white man bias. And I had a guy on our show who was the CEO of Read.ai. I don't know. Anybody use Read.ai to record your meetings in this room?
Yep.
Yeah, Read. So Read is like Firefly, it's like Otter, if you use those kinds of tools. And so he built his own training models and used lots of different races and sexes to train those models to get rid of as much bias as he could. And so I think that that's something that's going to have to be on our minds, because if we inject a lot of bias into these answers, it's going to be inappropriate.
Okay.
And then I will say, to answer the question about education, if I may, I'm excited about people having the brain space to be creative using these tools. And so when I think about the 80%, 20% rule of how much work we do that keeps us busy, not necessarily the work that feeds us or gives us energy. I'd like to see these machines take over some of those jobs, so that not just as individuals and businesses, but also as communities. What is that going to feel like and look like when all of that creative energy is being unleashed on some of the problems that we have?
So getting back to this, appropriateness. I'm in the process of, I just finished another book, and one of the concepts I have is that there are lots of remarkable people who started in one industry or one expertise and made complete career changes. Jane Goodall is an example of the opposite, where she started with animals and stuck with animals. And so I go to ChatGPT and I said, give me examples of people who had dramatic career changes. And one of the answers it gave me was Julia Child. So believe it or not, Julia Child started French cooking in her mid-30s. Up to that, she worked for the OSS, the precursor to the CIA. So Julia Child went from spook to chef, okay? So that example is in my book. Did I cheat? I'm not taking what ChatGPT said word for word. ChatGPT just told me Julia Child, and I expanded on that. And I had my own research done to make sure that ChatGPT just wasn't making shit up.
Yeah.
But would you say that's cheating, that I got the insight to use Julia Child in my book? That it never would have come to me without ChatGPT.
I would say it's not cheating. And with Bard and with the newer versions of ChatGPT, there's sourcing. And so if you are searching and getting decent sources, and those are trusted sources, then I think you're okay.
Yeah, I agree. I think that you did say something that was really important, though, and that's that you
Just one thing?
You double at least one. You double checked, right?
Yes.
And
yes.
so I think that's really important. But it used to be that you'd go to the library and you'd try and look up something, say, in an abstract system, and find an article and find the thing that would lead you to your conclusion about Julia Child, perhaps.
Right.
But that took a long time. So what you were able to do is to make a shortcut and do it faster. But then it's what you do with that information, I think, that makes it creative.
Okay. So now, let's suppose someone is applying to UCSC, and there's a question that says, why UCSC? What attracts you to our school? And you put that into ChatGPT, and the person was thinking, I don't know, outstanding engineering department, close to the Bay Area tech jobs, blah, blah, blah. And ChatGPT comes up with a seventh reason. And that reason is like great racial diversity that, in Watsonville and these outlying areas, it's not all white old men anymore. It's very diverse. And you were writing this application and that never occurred to you. Now, good use of ChatGPT, it's making me have a better college app, but it's something that I didn't think of. Good or bad?
I think it's okay. I'm not sure that I'm on a grayscale guy, probably not black and white. I reached out to our director of admissions, Michelle Whittingham, and I asked her about GPT or AI more generally,
Right.
because we use Chat GPT when it's not really the only thing, right? And how were the admissions people in the UC
Yeah.
thinking about it? And I think that she relayed that probably students will use Chat GPT to help with some of their essays, but the essays students write is about how they've overcome challenges in their own lives. And so for that to be authentic, maybe Chat GPT is a better version of Grammarly, or sort of helps me upgrade my writing, which is how one of the ways we're using it at the university is to help students improve their own writing.
Okay.
But I think where the line probably gets drawn at some point is how you then would use AI in selecting the students who come to the university, because now you've got this danger of, I think, automating it and eliminating the human factor of really judging the applications.
Well, let me ask you something. So let's say that you get 150,000 common apps, roughly, right?
Okay.
And let's say you shove all 150,000 into ChatGPT, or maybe it can't do that yet, but Bard or Claude or one of them, right? You send all 150,000 common apps, and you tell the large language model, pick the top 15,000 for me. We're not going to have readers. We're not going to have admission staff. You just tell me which 15,000 belong in our university. What do you think would happen?
I think that you'd have to define what top means.
Okay.
Right. So what we do at UC Santa Cruz is to look at what students have accomplished in the context in which they are in. Probably AI might be able to help figure that out. But then how do you decide which students will be successful at the university? I think that's a challenge. I'm not sure how AI would do that, and we don't do it perfectly now, right? Mm-hmm. So I probably don't have a very good answer for you.
Well, I mean, I don't want to harp on you, but I just love this.
Oh, you do.
No. Okay, I promise, Boaz, I'm coming back to
Okay.
you. Okay, this while we're on the topic of admissions, now you have 150,000 common apps. What do you think would happen if you randomly selected 15,000? You didn't look at father and mother went to UCSC. Did they buy a building? Is the engineering department named after them? Are they on the rowing team? Did they play tennis? Did they take calculus at 5? Do they play violin? You just 150,000 common apps. Give me 15,000 random. Admit them. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I do want to say, we don't have legacy admissions. We don't have special criteria for athletes. And there's a firewall between people who donate to the university and the admissions process. So we can take those things
Okay,
off.
okay.
So, but truly random, I'm not sure what would happen. I'd like to think that the power of the university is in helping students achieve their potential.
Right.
And so what you've done up to that point in your life may help prepare you to be successful, but I would hope that we could help students be successful even if we admitted them in a random way. Right now we get about 70,000 applications. So it's not 150,000, but it's a whole lot. And we don't use test scores anymore to admit students. So a lot of what it is how students, how they've done in their prior education, and then what experiences they have. So it isn't all taking calculus at age 5, but it's other things that people have done that are really extraordinary.
Okay. So Boaz, the sort of corresponding question for you, because you already brought up resumes. You get 10,000 applications for a job, and you just say, ChatGPT, pick the top 20 candidates for me. I'm not going to go read everyone. I'm not going to ask you to screen, and just give me the 20 you think. What would happen?
I can tell you exactly what would happen.
Yay!
Not with 20,000. Is that what you said? 20?
Whatever.
Yeah. So the example that I showed you earlier, they didn't trust that the AI was going to deliver back to them in the stack ranking scores that would be appropriate. So they wanted to blind test it. And the first time they gave it, we blind tested it twice, because the first time we selected the applicant that they actually chose. So they gave us 1,000 resumes. They had already selected the person that they were going to choose, but they went back and they gave us all the resumes they looked at. And the AI chose the person that they gave the job to the first time.
Wow.
Really?
And it was blind. And then they said it's impossible. So they did it again, another job description, 1,000 more. And this time it didn't choose the one, but it had it in the top 3%. So, and the way that we did it was we used the large language model not to look at the resume first. We looked at the job description and the resume and created evidence and ranked the evidence so that there wasn't bias. And then we looked at the unstructured resumes, they were PDFs, and then stacked it against the evidence. So I think it's possible. I still would want the recruiters to look at it. And then, and be part of the loop, as I said before. But it saved them a lot of time, and I think they feel a lot more confident in being able to go through all those resumes.
Well, but I would make the case there's a little bit of a missing element there that, that's fantastic that the large language model picked the top 3 or the same person. But what if both sources pick the wrong person? Just because you match the human pick doesn't mean you got the right person, right? So
I don't know the answer to that, but I was talking to a recruiter today because I was telling them this story. And they were sharing something with me, being honest. They said, when I see a huge stack of resumes on my desk and I start going through them, like 500 resumes, I'm working fast. And if I get to some folks at the top of the stack and they're looking pretty good, I don't really look at the rest. I just kind of push them on.
Wow.
So humans sometimes let people go by too.
Wow. So in that sense, a large language model would be an equalizer, right? Because the large language model doesn't get tired, right? Wow. Huh. Very personal question. Do you still use a search engine?
I do. I still use a search engine.
How often?
I use a search engine every day, but I use ChatGPT every day too, and I use Bard a lot too. I like Bard. I think search, is going to change for us. There's going to be a lot of AI going on in the background, but I think it's still powerful. I still search, a lot of terms that I don't really want to have a conversation. I don't want to ask a follow-up question. I just want to know the answer. And I think that's the funny thing about chat, as it's going to kind of evolve for all of us, is that I don't always want to talk to my computer like that.
Okay, and how do you use the search engine, if you do?
Yeah, I use search engines, and I use it often to find a word, sort of like you.
A word?
Yeah. I don't like the word that's come to my mind, so what are all the synonyms for it? And I'm not a very good speller. So if I put in the wrong spelling, the search engine will often tell me what the right spelling was.
Can I share one more thing?
Okay. Yeah. I have to admit, I'm shocked at your answer.
Okay.
Because, no, go ahead.
Well, I will just say, I can tell a lot of people in this room use ChatGPT a lot. So just a show of hands. How many people in this last week use ChatGPT?
Everybody.
Amazing. Okay. Many of you probably already know this, but I'll tell you, for those that don't, I use ChatGPT as a research assistant in this way.
Oh, so do I.
It's kind of a search way, so it is related to search. I'll ask it to start out with, I'll say, pretend you're an expert on this particular subject. I'm going to ask you a series of questions. We're going to go back and forth. I want you to give me truthful questions. And I want to have this conversation, go on until I'm ready. Are you ready? And I always ask it, are you ready? Because I want to be polite to ChatGPT. And it answers me. It says, yes, I'm ready. Let's go. I'll be your expert. Let's have a conversation. And I find that that's a great way of learning about a topic that I might have before used, Google search to kind of drill into a topic, but now I can have this conversation with ChatGPT. So if you've never done that before, go home today and try to have a special conversation with ChatGPT.
Your use. So as a writer, I need to find synonyms and antonyms all the time. Okay. And I have found ChatGPT infinitely better because I can say, find me another way of saying stupid. And it would give me 10 things. Thesaurus.com might give me 5. And then I can say, but I like alliteration. So find me a way to say stupid starting with C. And it gives me 5. So right there, it's helping me. But even better, I think with thesaurus.com, you give it one word, it finds you a one-word antonym or synonym. With ChatGPT, you say, find me another way of saying radical innovation. And it will come back with 2 or 3 word answer. You couldn't do that in thesaurus.com. And so I find that extremely useful for alliteration and for giving me another way of a concept, not just a word, or the opposite of radical innovation. So you might try that.
I will. Thanks for the advice.
Yeah.
The other way.
My son's going to be applying soon.
Oh, good. The other way I use search engines is to find people. Like a lot of times I'll be looking for someone who I've met or someone who might be working in a particular field.
Yeah.
Right. So I'll use a search engine to tell me about what they've done lately, especially in science or in something in the university.
Yeah. I think ChatGPT definitely makes shit up in that scenario. I would not believe ChatGPT for that. Yeah. All right, so you asked 2 questions of the audience. So how many of you think you use a search engine just about the same amount before ChatGPT and now? Same amount. How many use a search engine? Much less. I use it much less. Like, if I have a question like, which I bet many people can relate to, like, how do I add a HP printer to a Mac Wi-Fi network? I would ask Bard that before I would ask Google that all day long. I really think that Bard would come up with a better answer. Next question. There seems to be this like great debate about AI is good for coming up with synonyms and antonyms, but it's not sentient. I could tell you many politicians are not sentient either, but that's another topic. So in this day and age, how would you define sentient?
So I used to think self-aware,
Yeah.
but now I'm not so sure that I'm going to be able to use that much longer, right? So because maybe the robots won't take over, but they'll know what they're doing, right? So I think for me, maybe it's feelings, right? So if we're sentient, we feel, we have emotions, we feel things. I wonder if ChatGPT or AI will have feelings. They will be able to describe them. Will they have them?
Well, but by that test, isn't a dog sentient?
Yeah, and I have one. She's great.
So how do you define sentient? Yeah, I'm not sure how I would define it exactly, but I do think about AI and exactly what's happening under the hood as it relates to creativity. And when I think about a sentient being and what's possible with AGI, I mean, I guess when I look at large language models now and I think about what they're doing, they're fast and they're amazing, but they're just recommendation tools that are recommending the next word. It just seems magical because feels like a human experience, but it's not really a human experience. And when I think about the kind of creativity, that I do artistically, or when I was a designer, it's really, really hard to replicate with these large language models. And so I think that there is some sort of thought process that is not even close to being replicated.
Like what kind of question do you think that a large language model could not creatively answer?
I think that the prototyping of certain architectural designs would be very difficult for a large language model to get right. I mean, you could get Midjourney to give you some images and some answers, but the design process that I experienced in school, it'd be hard to kind of replicate that.
And well, okay, I know what will happen because I've done it. So what if you ask the question, which I think takes great human creativity and great knowledge? How can I get more subscribers for my podcast? And I'm telling you, ChatGPT gives a great answer to what I consider, someone had to be a human expert to know that before. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's different than giving you a blank piece of paper and saying, here, I want you to conceive of a design that's particular to this site,
yeah,
based on this historical criteria, and I want you to kind of create something from nothing that is not based on a bunch of blog posts that somebody wrote about SEO.
Okay. Just you can answer this question if you want. I'll answer it first. Like there is no doubt in my mind that ChatGPT is smarter than me. None at all. And I say that with a great deal of pride. I think I have faced the devil inside me. And I think ChatGPT is smarter than me. You think it's smarter than you?
I think it is smarter than me. I think it can pass a lot more tests than I can pass. To go back to your earlier question, though, I did have an answer. I use ChatGPT for prototyping. And I would say that, when I stare at a blank piece of paper sometimes and I have to write something or design something, it can slow me down. And it definitely helps me. I don't think it's cheating to have ChatGPT help you generate some ideas that's a starting point for something that can be magical that you create.
How about you? Who's smarter, you or ChatGPT?
Probably ChatGPT. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, how about you? How many of you think that ChatGPT is smarter than you?
How do you define smart? Emotional intelligence. What about emotional intelligence? Do you think ChatGPT is more emotionally intelligent than you are?
Yeah. I do actually. This is a rare moment of Guy Kawasaki humility. I hope you appreciate it. So, I'd love to, or Boaz in particular, I'd love to hear what you're going to say. Like a few months ago, there was this call from these tech bros that we don't know what is quite happening with AI. Maybe we should take a 6-month break from developing AI. Now, we need some perspective here. So just first question is, do you think that is dumber or smarter than saying the California forest fires were caused by space lasers? Like, which do you think is the dumber statement?
I'm not sure which is the dumber statement, but there is no breaks. I mean, the ship has sailed, and we're not taking any breaks. We can get smart about how we create guardrails around what we're doing, but there's no breaks that are going to be happening, and Elon's not going to make it happen.
But I mean, so how do you explain that these seemingly smart tech bros said something that dumbass?
I mean, the truth is that Elon and Sam Altman want everybody else to take a break, and they want the government to regulate so they can win this race. That's the truth of it. And they will probably win the race. But you just want to make sure that small businesses and open source is there for the ride, like Linux is. That's all.
Okay. So, Chancellor, in education, what does AI enable you to do that you've already been doing? And what does AI enable you to do in education you could never do before?
So I think one of the things it can do that we've always been doing is kind of help with the rudimentary tasks of either teaching or learning. So used to be that in the teacher's edition of the textbook, they'd have example problems that you could use, right?
Right.
But now you could use AI to say, help me, here's where I am in the course. Help me with some quiz problems that I could assign. You could do something like that. You could make a study guide for your class that's not just based on what's in the book, but based on the resources that I used and my notes and other things as well, to make a study guide that could help the students. So I think there's ways that it could help with that. I think it's got great potential for helping to teach people how to write better. And so not just to write for them, but to help them learn about their own writing process, because the most important part of writing is the ideas, right? And then it's how do you translate those ideas into writing. And some of the ways that it's being used on our campus is there's a history course where students are asked to make a prompt to ChatGPT and a primary source about some event in history. So an example might be the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yeah.
And then the ChatGPT will create dialogues that they could have with people about what the experience was at that time. So to help put students in the context of history. There's also an art course where students are using AI to look at art that is in the style of a famous artist. Like, so to have art, to create art in the style of Gauguin or Monet, and then to compare it to the original, and then see critique it, right? So to be able to teach critical thinking and also understand, what's special about different artists that they might be studying.
You could have never done that before.
I think it would be impossible.
Yeah, yeah. And Boaz, how about in business?
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So, and I guess this relates to business in a way, but it also, Guy and I were talking earlier about one of the books that, it was a book, but also a blog post, and if any of you have seen his guide on how to put a pitch deck together. Has anybody seen that? So the first time I ever raised money, I used that guide to put my pitch deck together, and I closed the round. And it wasn't only because of that, but it was an amazing way to organize my thoughts as it related to putting this pitch deck together. And now I see AI tools for presentation that are creating presentations based on a few prompts. And I guess my question for you is, have you tried using any of those presentation tools? And as you think back about the 10-slide rule, is there going to be a Guy Kawasaki 10-slide AI?
Well, I haven't raised money for a long time. I'm a chief evangelist for Canva, and Canva has integrated AI. Canva has the ability to make 16 by 9 presentations, hundreds of templates pre-done for you. And you can go there and say, make me a presentation to raise money for, shrimp farming software or whatever. And it'll spit one out. I don't know if it's as good as the one you made personally, but it's a great start. Mm. Now, sort of related to your question is, so I decided that I was going to create Kawasaki GPT. So you can literally go to kawasakigpt.com and you can ask me how many slides should be in a presentation, what's the ideal font, what are the 10 main topics you should. So I put all my writing, all my blog posts, and the transcripts of 200 interviews I've had with my guests on my podcast. So everything in my head is theoretically there. It's as close as I'm going to get to immortal as. and I want people to think that they can tap my knowledge. Now, I'm telling you this because what I don't understand, and maybe one of you can explain to me, I also see these things where these these writers and authors, they're suing large language model companies because you use my writing in my book to create your model. And I've co-authored a book, and the co-author didn't want the book to be in the large language model. And for the life of me, I cannot figure out why you. I mean, I'm trying to put all my writing in large language models because I want ChatGPT to someday say, well, according to Guy Kawasaki, you should use 10 slides, right? So like, what am I missing? Why would an author get all, his underwear or her underwear all twisted because Bard read my book and used it as a data set? What's the problem?
The problem is the attribution that authors want credit or attribution, but that content may be used without identifying their research. I think that's the.
Okay, you gotta say that again for me. Believe it or not, and people who surf with me know this is true, I'm basically deaf. And so I have a cochlear implant, but a cochlear implant doesn't work across the room, so I don't know what she said.
Yeah, she said, I'll try to paraphrase, but that it's because of attribution. They want to be recognized for the
Recognized.
I think the other thing too, and I was just in Hollywood doing a presentation, and there was a bunch of writers there who were concerned about AI, and they also want to get paid.
But I mean,
for the work that they do,
right,
that is training models. They want attribution, but they also want.
Okay, the attribution I can kind of understand. That's emotional and personal, but the compensation, like, so let's say that someone searches ChatGPT and asks how many slides should be in a presentation, and ChatGPT says 10, and it should contain these 10 things. No attribution to me, but it got it from me. Let's just say. I'm trying to wrap my mind. How is it that I'm going to get that 10th of a cent to me?
Yeah.
Like, how am I getting compensated? And I guess my attitude, which maybe other authors don't share, is that I think one of the moral responsibilities of the author is to increase the level of literacy and education and enlightenment. So I'm not trying to get that 1 cent royalty for that being from me. I would rather go to my grave knowing that I helped people create better presentations.
What if you were an actor and you were scanned and your likeness and personality was being used by others? Would you feel the same way?
Yeah. Wait, say that again. I bet maybe.
So if you were, there's many actors now that are getting full scans so that they can have their, let's say they're on set for a certain portion of the time, but they don't want to go back to set to do the pickup lines. So now their bodies are scanned and they can go back and do that later. So AI can do that for them, and they want to be able to get compensated for the time.
Well, I mean,
but I just wonder, in your case, that's writing. But what about if it's your?
But you would think that Kevin Costner's lawyers are going to say, you can't exactly take Kevin Costner and use him in Yellowstone 25 free, right? I mean, that I understand. Do you have any thoughts about?
Why should we buy your books anymore? What if you weren't financially set, so you needed to sell your books?
Well, my response to you is that if you think that you can ask ChatGPT enough questions efficiently to get everything you would get out of reading my 200-page book, God bless you, have at it. I guarantee you that my book is more cogent put together than you asking all the prompts you can. But if you can get away with it, God bless you. I don't care. My book is going to be in there. Take it.
So it seems to me there are two ethical things I worry about. One of them is this attribution, especially around creative arts. I think art and music and writing too. That people who have put their inspiration, their creativity, their efforts into things, they're probably deserve to have some recognition
Okay.
for that. I think about the scientific papers I wrote; they're already all out there. I have no feeling bad about digesting all of those, right? It's data. I put them out there for people to use them. But there are some acts of creation that are somehow more personal. And I think it comes back to what you were talking about earlier is this the spark, the prototyping, the real creativity that's part of what makes us human,
So-
right?
So if you pick up the Wall Street Journal one day and you read about a company that is using an NMR method that you pioneered back at the University of Kentucky or Rochester or wherever you went.
Kansas.
Yeah, the same thing. So, and you're not getting a nickel from that company now using your NMR method.
It's fine.
It's fine?
It's happened. It's okay.
I-
I didn't patent it, right? So I don't own that intellectual
Right.
property. I published it to make it available for the world.
And I would make the case for me, and I think for you, even if nobody else knew, I would feel very satisfied that I helped advance humanity with this new NMR method, right?
Sure.
Oh, are you pulling us off?
No, not pulling you off. I'm gonna say one last question, and then we're gonna open it for 5 minutes of Q&A. So
Okay.
One last question. Just.
No, we can go straight to Q&A right now.
Yeah.
Is that it? Okay.
Now, you got to understand, okay? You guys have to be my ears because I am not going to understand what they said.
Should we take a mic?
Yeah, why don't we start in the back here, in the red shirt?
I am Patricia with Rio College. I work in the employment internship office. I see a lot of qualified students applying for jobs, but they're booted because of the AI system. I would like to know how we can overcome that system. And also, I would like to educate my employers about how they can better write their job descriptions to overcome the AI system to qualify students and graduates in our programs.
Sounds like a question for you, Boaz.
No, I was going to repeat the question.
Oh, okay.
So here, no, you go.
Do you want to repeat the question?
Please repeat the question.
Okay. So the question was about applications that were coming into your college, being able to understand the best way to write job descriptions to make sure that AI is unbiased when it comes to reading those job descriptions or reading those applications. Is that right?
It's not applications coming in for jobs.
No, not for jobs.
It's
For students, yes, sorry.
Yes.
Yeah, student applications, and making sure that those are unbiased, or that the AI is unbiased when looking at those.
Yeah, so it's matching students to jobs, I think is what the question is.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of in your wheelhouse about, choosing resumes. And so it part of it probably has something to do with the job description, don't you suppose? And if the job description is written in a way that maps onto the way that the students write their application.
Yeah, and I think if you're clear about how those job descriptions are put together and you can create evidence based on those job descriptions and match them against the applications, it'll be easier for the AI to kind of understand. I know that there are people that are using AI to write job descriptions too, and you need to be careful about that, but it's being kind of clear about the criteria that you're establishing for those applications. If those can match well, then I feel confident the AI can do an okay job. I still would want a human to be involved in the process.
We've been talking a bit about how whether it's cheating to use AI and how it can be fair. I have maybe a slightly different question. So 20 years ago, maybe a little longer, we all used these things called paper maps, and you'd unfold them and you'd find things and you'd know how to get around. And then Google Maps came along, and it's an amazing technology. One of the most interesting things to me about it is how it changed us. Like, we are different beings now because we use Google Maps. With AI, I'm really concerned about how we become different because we now just ask questions to ChatGPT. We no longer, we say, why do I need to know this in calculus or whatever? we're no longer critical thinking ourselves the same way. I don't know, but my question to you is, how does AI change us as human beings in 10 years?
I think it's a good one for you
Give it to
guys.
her. She's the
Give it to
chancellor.
me. Well, I'll give my answer, then you give yours.
I don't think so. I don't want to follow you.
Oh. You know, I think that is right. I do remember too when we all got calculators, and then at first we couldn't use our calculators in class because we would forget how to add and multiply. Maybe I did. I don't know. I haven't done it for a while. But you know, these tools. I come back to the idea that the real goal is creation, innovation, and solving problems. And so maybe I'll be different because I can use these things. I can get around better in my car because I don't have a very good sense of direction. So the tools that tell me how to drive, or that there's an accident and I should go this other way, I kind of like that. So I might be different, but maybe I'm better at accomplishing what I want to accomplish. Maybe AI will be the same.
A philosophical question, but it comes down to like the commodification of genius. Like, right? Up till now, we've been the only contestants at the genius marketplace. You know, humans have always been the source of brilliant new ideas. And now we're competing with AI, which could conceivably, even not now in a few years, generate 10 times more brilliant things. And is that a good thing?
Well, first, I like my interpretation of how people come up with brilliant ideas is maybe you got to understand. I work for Steve Jobs, right? So I have PTSD, but I don't know. I think half of coming up with brilliant ideas is knowing what to steal, right? So you know, if you go to Xerox Park and you see the trash can icon and the WYSIWYG display, and you say, shit, I should steal that. Or you go to Xerox Park and, you know, they have some other weird protocol. You say, what the hell is that? So part of the genius of Steve Jobs is he knew what to steal. And I think that's a valuable skill. So I think, you know, whatever tool you have, you use all the tools at your disposal. And part of those tools is knowing what to steal. Like I use a top 10 format for my speeches. I stole that from David Letterman. Some people think I'm genius for using top 10 format. I stole it from David. I'm proud of that. You know, like you can tell a lot about a person from who he steals from.
It doesn't matter that humanity is no longer.
One last question in the back, okay? Seems good.
You know, I'm thinking about how you're reacting to the challenges of you know, these AI assistants. And you said, for example, Guy, well, you know, I got this answer, but then I checked it, right? You've grown up without it. And so you have an inborn skepticism.
True.
About it.
That's true.
There are kids growing up now who have none of that skepticism and none of that ability, I think, to understand that this thing that they're using is not something they should trust, like the doorknob or anything else. So how do we deal with this in 20 years when we've lost the skepticism of these agents that we've created?
Take that.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it's a great question. And
it is a great question.
Worry, I don't have a great answer for you, but my worry is the DocuSign phenomenon. You know, just accept. And I just think that that's a worry that more and more people are just going to kind of bypass the reading of the contract and just move forward on things. So I wish I had a better answer for you, but it's one of my concerns as well.
Well, I mean, at a real practical level, I'll give you an example. So when ChatGPT first opened up, I asked it, what college did Steve Jobs graduate from? Okay? And ChatGPT said he graduated from Reed. And I know he dropped out. So, now you're saying because I'm old, I'm skeptical. That's the gist of what you said. But I would make the case that, let's say I was young and not skeptical, and I asked ChatGPT, where did Steve Jobs graduate from college? And ChatGPT said Reed, and then I went to my class and my teacher said, Steve Jobs graduated from Reed. And the teacher ripped me a new one because you didn't do your work. Steve Jobs did not graduate. You cannot believe everything you find on the computer or on the internet. I think that's going to just occur and occur, and you're going to have to learn. It's just another skill, right?
It's critical thinking, right?
What a concept. What a concept.
And that's a wrap.